Hi, and welcome to Enriched Perspective with Mike and Talisha Wallace, where we seek to shift paradigms through the exploration of biblical principles. I'm Mike.
And I'm Talisha.
Welcome to the podcast.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about relationships and how they start and how they begin and how we can enrich our perspective on just to make them better. When we're talking about beginning relationships, we talk about like the attraction and how you get to know someone and what causes someone to want to even meet or talk to somebody. And what I'm thinking about is curiosity can be one thing that causes someone to want to talk to you, or you share a common interest. Even circumstances can bring people together. And believe it or not, divine intervention. Sometimes it's just the will of God for you to be together. So, Michael, what are some of your ideas of what do you think can cause people to want to talk to each other?
Of course, from a man's perspective, definitely it's the attraction that causes a guy to want to engage in conversation with the young lady. Introductions, of course, from mutual acquaintances. Arrangements is another one.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that's kind of outdated, but it's something that still occurs. And then there's just a knowing that happens at times where you just see that person and it's just something about them and you know that that's the one.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I think it mainly is a man thing because I don't understand how does that happen. Even you said when we were getting together or got together that you just had that knowing.
Yeah, I don't think it's just a man thing, but I think we are the ones that typically own up to it because, of course, we're still seen as the ones as kind of the pursuer.
Right.
So, and everybody thinks that men are typically undecisive or they really don't know what they want and they're all over the place, especially when it comes down to picking a mate. So for us, when we say, I just knew, what that's saying is like, girl, I only got eyes for you.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, I think about like when I was saying divine intervention, maybe that's like from a female perspective, or some people say God told me. And that's kind of one of the things that was from my experience. Like, I know God told me that I was supposed to be married to you. So that's why I say divine intervention. Some people have that causes you to say, well, what is it about this person? Or I guess I better see what God is talking about here for the relationship to begin. And then just people growing up in church or they take art classes together. They have things that are in common that could also lead to the introduction or wanting to get to know somebody else, or just a curiosity. Like I said before, like I'm just curious about you. There's just something about you that is attracting me and making me want to get to know you better.
Yeah, for me, it was still more of the knowing. Like you said, it was a divine intervention, and it was God that had to speak to you from the clouds, unfortunately.
What?
But for me, I just saw you, and I just knew that it was you.
Everybody has their reasons or their stories that get them to getting into a relationship.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
this is one that I still kind of am curious about or intrigued with, which is the arranged marriages. And we see a lot of that even in the Bible days, and other cultures still practice this tradition.
I have a friend, or a couple of friends actually, at my job who are of Indian descent, and they actually do still practice arranged marriages. Of course, they've been modernizing and kind of changing their traditions and customs over the last few years, but it is still something that's heavily followed in their tradition. And it's funny because, being from the American culture, we think like you have to go through these stages. First of all, you ain't letting definitely not your parents pick your mate.
Right.
And then even after you pick your mate, it's like there's a lot of, positioning in order for you to determine if that's the right person for you.
Yeah.
Whereas with the arranged marriages, I mean, I've heard they go on a website in some cases and they have like a list and a profile of the different people, that are available. And the parent goes through and they select the ones they think are the right ones for their child and kind of sends them like, hey, you need to look at these profiles, and if they fit, I think then they have a conversation or whatever the case may be.
Wow.
And if it goes any further, then they, get all the way up to the marital piece. I had one friend who actually, he lived here, she lived in India. And I think the first time that they actually met face to face was like the week they was getting married.
Wow.
It was pretty interesting, and it definitely kind of almost sounds similar for what we, our whole situation, but
Wow.
it take it to a whole nother level, and that's what everybody probably think like, y'all got was that arranged marriage? Like, no, not in
Right.
the traditional sense,
Exactly.
but that still exists.
Well, it was arranged by that divine intervention, though.
Yeah, yeah. I'll
Mm-hmm.
go ahead. That's true. That is true.
See, we were arranged by God.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I ain't got
that
nothing else to
happened.
say about that.
But that's amazing. I wonder, my curiosity is how successful those marriages are being arranged, considering how the world that we live in, the society that we live in, has a different view on how successful marriages happen or how they work, or even compared to the Word of God, how the world views getting into relationships, how they start, what happens after that initial beginning. It's a whole different mindset. So, arranged marriages seems super far fetched for Americans and just different ones, just based on the traditions that we live in and the society that we live in.
True.
So,
And
yeah.
yeah, when you talk about biblical, I mean, you look at Isaac and Rebecca. I mean, they were the first ones that I can recall that was really arranged. If you want to go back even further, of course, Adam and Eve.
Right.
I mean, God made Eve out of Adam, out of his rib, and he just presented her to him, and I would call that pretty arranged,
Oh
if you
yeah.
want to
Like,
say that.
here's your wife.
All right,
Enjoy.
here's your wife. You have no other options. I mean, that's it. Here she
Right.
is. But beyond Adam and Eve, of course, you had Isaac and Rebecca. You had also Jacob, with Rachel, and also Leah as well. You had multiple. I think it was Boaz and Ruth was
Hmm.
somewhat arranged, based
Right.
on their laws and their customs.
Hmm.
Like I say, you look at a couple of different places. Of course, with the kings, there's a lot of arranged marriages for political reasons, of course, but
Right.
you don't really see a ton of places where it follows the more American approach to
Right.
marriage.
Yeah, which brings me to my next topic. Usually, when you see movies or you read books or you watch different shows, they tend to put out into our minds and psyche of how relationships are supposed to be built. And it's usually backwards, compared to what the Word of God is, as far as like the commitment part and getting to know each other. Usually, we see you do the physical stuff first, and then you try to get into this committed relationship, loving and all this. But it's nothing compared to how the Word of God explains how our relationship should go.
Yeah, that's so true. Like I say, for us, it's always physical intimacy, and then track back to friendship, and then hopefully relationship, and then ultimately some form of commitment through marriage. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we were growing up. Courtship was one of those no-nos. Like, we didn't believe in courting.
Ain't no coat in holiness.
We used to hear that all the time. But the reason why was because courting was always associated with physical intimacy, or let's go with fornication.
Right.
We didn't assume that you could have courtship without some type of physicality involved.
Right.
Especially, I mean, and just be honest. I mean, you talk about youth, young people who are mentally immature, and they're horny. Let's just go ahead and say it.
Oh yeah.
And you put them two together and you start rubbing them hot stones together, eventually you're going to spark a fire.
Right.
And because a lot of times we're not really taught how to approach relationships, or how to even approach the beginning or the start of relationships, what mindset to go into it with,
Right.
we go in, taking that worldly view of, the only way that I can get him to like me, or even her for that matter, is, I have to, do something. I have to be kissing. I have to be hugging and rubbing. Eventually we have to have sex. Otherwise, it's not something that can be considered a real relationship if we're not having sex.
Right. It's like I have to show it physically that I'm with you, that I like you. That's the only expression of love I know is fornication.
And the bad thing is now after you've committed fornication, and that's kind of your leader, and that's what you're using to help or hopefully garner, the friendship, or hopefully garner the actual emotional intimacy that you're looking for. And a lot of times it does not result in that. If not anything, it really kind of jeopardizes the process,
Right.
because you get stuck on that. I
Right.
mean, once you start, dabbing and you start playing around, before you know it, that's all that's on your mind. Like I say, and if you're, like I say, the minute you start that physicality, a kiss, like I say, you get tired of kissing, you get tired of making out.
Right.
Now you want to explore, because again, this is what you see on TV, this is what your friends is talking about, this is what you're seeing on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
Yeah.
Every media outlet that's out there is constantly promoting, sexual intercourse or some type of, sexual expression or physical expression of your love.
Right.
I mean, you can't get around it. So, and now you're sitting there, like I say, you're a teen, you don't have a lot of direction, or even sometimes as an adult, because your direction has been, or your guidance has been, intimacy.
Right. And you forget that there is a mental intimacy that should precede physical intimacy.
Yeah, we don't even think about the mental part until after we've done the physical part.
Yeah.
A lot of times they've been had sex and be like, oh, I love her. Like, why?
You don't even know what's her middle name, what's her last name,
what's her first name, barely.
Right.
You know,
all these one night stands and things that could just lead to a lot of unwanted pregnancies, diseases, heartbreak, bad reputations. All these results from just not entering into relationships the correct way.
Correct. And again, people talk about, well, you can avoid some of that having safe sex, but truthfully speaking, and definitely from a spiritual standpoint, there is no such thing as safe sex unless it's in the confines and in the construct of marriage.
Right.
Because everything outside of marriage is considered fornication.
That's right.
And fornication is one of those things that will bring about spiritual death.
That's right.
We haven't talked about it, but the Bible has many different references and points to speaking of fornication. Like I say, if you commit fornication, you will not inherit the kingdom of God.
That's right.
It tells us to flee fornication.
That's right.
Because that's one of those things that we do with and against our own bodies. When we commit fornication, he say, flee youthful lust.
That's right.
He also says, in order to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and every woman her own husband. Because that was one of those key things that really troubled, the Gentile church.
That's right. It even says flee fornication.
Yep.
Yeah. Your body was not made for fornication.
Correct.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's the temple of the Holy Ghost.
That's true.
It's made for your spouse. It is made for your spiritual dwelling of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when we talk about relationships, and especially the genesis or the beginning of them, we put fornication right at the top.
Right.
And there's other things that really should precede sexual intimacy, and we don't really deal with it because we're not typically aware.
Right.
There is not a lot of influences out there that's telling us that commitment should be the number one thing that you're looking at and that you're searching for when you're talking about building a relationship.
Right.
Especially when you talk about from an enriched perspective standpoint, you talk about from a biblical perspective, commitment actually is the first thing.
Right. And even when you look at the Gospels, God committed himself to us before we even build a relationship with him. He's already put it out there. Hey, I'm showing you that I'm committed to you. And if we want to get to God, it's like we have to be committed to him first, and then you begin to build that relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and again, it's approaching it from that perspective. You're looking for and you're searching for commitment.
Right.
Yeah, you might look good, like say, it might have been a nice introduction, and like I said, but at the end of the day, even if I'm knowing, I'm still looking at it from the perspective of commitment, because everything you feel, that doesn't mean the other person feels the same way.
True.
And a lot of times people have given of themselves to someone that just does not have the same opinion.
Exactly.
And that's where you get the heartbreak, and that's where you get the bitterness and the anger. That's where you get a lot of the vindictiveness, from men and from women. Like say you said earlier, talking about having children outside of wedlock. A lot of times that was the intent of that, was to bring about commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Figure, well, if I have his child, then maybe he'll commit to me. Or if I get her pregnant, then maybe she'll be more committed to me. Like I said, I have
Exactly.
this inroads. Like now we got a child together, so we stuck together forever.
Exactly.
And of course, how we was brought up, you have a child by someone, automatically the first thing people assume is, well, we need to get married.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we've seen it. A lot of folks that's been put into some pretty tough situations because they did everything first, and then the commitment was secondary.
Exactly.
And now, yeah, they're making it work, and they're doing their best, in their current circumstance, but it's not really what they wanted or desired.
Right. And I also think too, because commitment, it takes time and patience and effort when you're in a relationship. You can't just jump to the physical. People are impatient, or they're just dwelling on the wrong things, and they end up doing the physical part, which is that the binding of that covenant of a committed relationship, hoping that, well, we've already done this, so this is going to enhance our relationship because we've done the physical part, but you haven't worked up to where the reward of commitment is. Physical is the reward of commitment,
Mm-hmm.
and you find that your relationship is shallow, or you have a lot of um, gaps and holes because you didn't take the time to be intimate in the mental, and you jump to the physical, so you lose some stuff when you do
True.
that. So
And again, it's hard to focus back on that mental after you start,
right.
jumping into the physical.
Yeah.
Like you said that physical is the reward, and that's why when you talk about becoming of one flesh, I was talked about in Genesis. That was the binding of that agreement and that covenant between Adam and his wife.
Right.
You know, and when you talk about even in the Old Testament, when it spoke of betrothal, say you were betrothed, like I say, and during that time frame, it's kind of like the courtship or the engagement. The man would go off and try to get whatever is necessary to cover the dowry of his betrothed or his wife to be. Even though they were in a contract, the covenant wasn't really complete until they came together and became one. But the funny thing is even in the betrothal, it was as if they were already kind of married or committed to each other, because the Bible talks about if a young woman that is betrothed to someone commits fornication, her and whoever she was committing fornication with would be put to death, because it was just that serious.
Right.
And even we talk about Mary, when she was
The
pregnant with
spouse.
Jesus,
Yeah.
she was espoused already, so she was technically betrothed to Joseph.
Right.
And Joseph was a nice man. He was a good person, so he didn't want her to suffer the public, persecution or, ridicule. So he was going to put her away privately. But it took an angel of the Lord coming and speaking to him and helping him understand that this thing is of the Lord,
Divine
and it was a
intervention.
divine, act in order for him to not follow the law.
Right.
And again, but it really still, when you look at the actual physical intimacy, it is for marriage.
Right.
And I know people don't like to hear that, but one of the things I think we were talking about before is like the issues that come when you have intimacy with all these other people besides your companion.
Right.
And one of the things we were talking about, like I say, it's that expectation. Like I say, you've been around the block and back again, and now you find a one, and you have a hard time really, being satisfied by that one, because you got so many other memories, so many other experiences that you're leveraging or that you're basing or judging this person on.
Right.
Like I say, and that's unfair to them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you lose something. I would hate to be that person that's at a wedding or at my own wedding, and I'm standing up there, saying I do and I will. And I look out in the audience and I look across at the bridesmaid list, and like 5 or 6 of them I'd have been with, like 7 or 8 people in the audience I'd have been with, or
Right.
vice versa.
Right.
My best man has been her best man.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very challenging, and it
Right.
would cause issues in the
Right.
relationship.
And I just think there's a beauty to commitment, and, like you say, saving yourself and knowing the worth of a committed relationship. It does bring about a strength. It brings about a peace. It just brings about just a deeper love when you're saying, "I'm gonna wait for my spouse. I'm gonna learn them without being physical, be committed, be intimate, and then when that time comes, I will be physical in the right setting where it's legal and it's honored by God.
Yep. And there's also, like you mentioned, I think we talked about again before, where because we are or we have been already intimate on so many other levels beyond the physical, when we get to the physical, even if it's not what I anticipate, but because we've already built up that relationship, and because we know each other well, and we truly are committed to each other, and we're committed to this union, we would be willing to have that conversation.
Oh yeah.
Like I say, we can talk openly, freely, and lovingly to each other about, what you desire from an intimacy standpoint, physically.
Right.
And a lot of times people are very challenged in that regard because they don't have the level of relationship needed to have that. Because, I mean, come on, I'm going to be honest. You tell somebody they suck, I mean, they're going to get in their feelings.
But once again, that goes to having that patience with each other.
Right.
And you know that they're coming from a good place.
Yeah, I'm finna go there. So, I mean, like I said, that's where it's a challenge when you've had multiple partners.
Right.
I mean, somebody tearing it up, they knocking the walls down, and you find that one, and you love them and you're committed to them, but they ain't quite doing it, the way that you like it to be done. It's a hard conversation.
But if like you were saying before, if you have never experienced that, you wouldn't even know that there is something to be compared to.
Yes,
So
and that would be ideal.
that's the ideal. That's the Bible way.
That's the biblical way.
But we know a lot of people have not done things biblically.
Correct.
So
And you can't unlearn or you can't unremember your experiences, and you have that to deal with. Now you're
Right.
conflicted because, while I love this person, I care deeply for this person, and maybe I've waited until marriage to experience the physicality with this person. Now I get to the physical and it's like, quack, quack.
okay.
And people think it's always the man that's failing, but sometimes the woman fails too.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know what they're doing always. Sorry. But they have this assumption about, what a man likes or what he wants. And if you're not well rehearsed and versed, which is, again, another reason why people feel like they need to
Right.
go and have all of these different experiences so that they can be better prepared, that don't even make any sense.
Yeah.
Like I say, I don't want somebody that's been 50 ways from Sunday, turned all upside down, in and out,
Broke in.
like broke. I mean, not just broke in, just broke, and I get the leftovers and the leavings.
Right.
And they say, look at what I've got. I did it all for you. Yeah, sure. Okay. Thanks for that. It'd be so much better if we could learn together. If
Right.
in the confines and the construct of our committed,
Right.
loving, healthy relationship, we could take the time and learn together how to best both emotionally but also physically love one another.
Right.
And there may come a time where physicality may not even be on the table anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But because you've developed that next
Right.
level of intimacy through
Exactly.
having those conversations, through walking through it together, growing together, learning and loving one another, through the process of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, when it's cut off, like I say, your intimacy level is so deep that that's not even really the biggest issue anymore.
Right.
Like I say, but that all begins at the beginning.
Exactly.
It's all about how you start. If you start off with sex and that's the only thing that's really, the foundation of your relationship, you'll have problems.
Right.
Because, again, she's going to get older. He's going to get older. Physically,
Mhm.
things are going to change, or because, again, when you talk about commitment, this is for the long haul.
Right. And it's like building a foundation. You want to
Mhm.
make sure your foundation is solid. So
Yep.
just in case something happens, or you get maimed or
Yep.
something where you can no longer be on that level of intimacy, you still have a firm foundation in your relationship.
It's just time.
Right.
Like I say, and again, in a world where variety is the flavor of the day,
Oh yeah.
and everybody feels like everybody cheats,
Mhm.
and all of this stuff, and say it's normal. People look out, this, that, and the other, and it's like if you're not committed, they say you will fall into that trap.
Right. And that's definitely not what the Bible says about that.
Yeah. But if I'm not going into it with commitment in mind,
Right.
you know,
Which kind of leads me to intentionality.
mm-hmm.
Like when you're entering into a relationship, what should your mindset be when you see this person out of curiosity or common interest or circumstances or divine? What should your mindset be when you're entering into a relationship?
Yeah, for me, for better or for worse, I was kind of the interrogator.
Yeah.
Like I say, I'm always asking questions and I'm always seeking to understand, is there compatibility there?
Like,
I want to know who you are. I want to know what your goals and your dreams and your visions for your future are. I want to know who your parents are. I want to know your siblings. I want to know as much as I can about you as a person because, again, I'm thinking, like, can I be with this person long term?
so it's just not like a goof off session. Like you're gonna help me get my thrills and frills off.
No,
I guess you're intentionally getting to know this person with the intent of having a committed relationship.
absolutely. And it's just kind of one of those things that just came normal to me because I never was a boyfriend kind of guy.
Yeah.
I was always geared toward and I was trained and raised to be a husband.
Right.
So when I started dating, even though we weren't supposed to, I still took that mindset into how I approached, dating or finding the right person. Of course, it's the attraction that first caught me. But after the attraction, it was now time to figure out who this person was. Because again, I didn't want to be with anybody that I didn't have any type of, things common with, or like say, they didn't have any ambition. Because that was one of the things that's really big for me, or somebody that I didn't feel like I had any type of, connection beyond the physical with. Because I always kind of figured, like I say, eventually you're going to have to talk to that person.
Right.
Eventually we're going to have to spend time together. We can't be in the bed forever, so I want to know that, you have something about you that would cause me to stay interested because I get bored very fast,
Right.
as you know.
Oh yeah.
So if there was nothing there, if you didn't have any type of mental capacity, you weren't really, a learner, you wasn't about growing, developing, because I also had visions of, kind of being something, and kind of having, that American dream. I wanted somebody that was going to be able to follow me there, somebody I didn't mind presenting to my friends or, the group or that I chose to be in and around. They say I want nobody ignorant. I'm just saying, don't want her to talk to your friends because she'll say something stupid,
Right.
And quite frankly, I'm pretty sure that they didn't want the same.
Exactly.
So I was very intentional about trying to understand who they were, how they were, what their kind of overall life goals was. And this is me at 16.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
but that's just how I was wired. And it kept me out of a lot of trouble, of course,
Mhm.
because that physical thing wasn't the first thing. I wasn't looking to have sex first and foremost.
Right.
I was looking to, like, who are you? What are you about? Will that fit into kind of what my vision is for my future?
Right.
That was just me though.
Yeah. See, I have a completely different story to that. Going back to what we were talking about earlier about the teaching about courtship, and we was just told there's no dating. We don't date. Boys stay away from the girls. Girls stay away from the boys. But what was happening was we were growing up and nature was doing this thing. We started becoming attracted to boys and boys became attracted to us, but I don't know if I just didn't pay attention or we just weren't fully taught on how to handle those feelings. Me growing up, having low self-esteem and wanting attention and wanting to feel accepted and liked by people, I figured the world showed me was if you want people to like you, if you want boys to like you, give them what they want because boys only want one thing. That's what we always saw. That boys they only want one thing. So in my low self-esteem mind, I'm thinking like, well, if I want a boy to like me, I'm going to give him that one thing that, that would give me the feeling that I was searching for. So with my limited self-value, I was quite the opposite. I was just wanting somebody to like me. So I ended up doing things that I regret, talking about doing the physical first. I never got to the intimacy. That wasn't what that was on their mind. They were just thinking about physical as well. So the relationship and the love and the acceptance that I was looking for, I didn't get. I was left in that hollow, shallow end, used, um, feeling worse because I first of all was going against my teaching. I knew better than wasn't supposed to be doing that, but still left confused. Like, well, what do I do now? Who do I talk to? How can I recover from this? How do I repair? But instead, I found myself going deeper down, more feeling more depressed and ashamed of the things that I was doing. So it wasn't until I gave my life to the Lord that God had already had committed himself to me. When I committed myself to him, I began to rebuild that or learn who I was through relationship with God, and helped me to see that I had self-value, I had self-worth. And so now I can teach my daughters, teach our sons that you have value, you have self-worth. This having a purity is a beautiful thing. It's not a bad thing. You don't have to give yourself away for acceptance. Um, if you're going to enter into a relationship, this is how you do it. This is the right way, according to the Word of God, of how you can have a committed relationship without the extra baggage. So when you do get married, you can look out and be proud. You can wear your white dress and not know, but that I've been with somebody. I hope my ex don't come to the wedding, or they gonna come to my husband later on and tell her, hey, do it like this. She liked it. You can have where you can have where you don't have that on your mind. So just speaking from my experience, hopefully I can help someone else to avoid going down that path of not having that self-worth, entering into relationships the backwards way, the physical, then trying to get to know them, and then hoping that they'll like you, then hoping that they'll commit to you, then trying to force them to commit to you, and it never happens because they got what they wanted.
True.
They came in, they got what they wanted out of the relationship. Why would I commit to you when you already gave me what I was willing to put into a relationship anyway, which was the physical part. So now that I know better after getting into a relationship with Christ, that there is a better way. Definitely don't want to go the world's way into relationships.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because, like I say, most people, when they talk about virginity, they talk about young women.
Right.
And here it is. It's like we're kind of flip-flopped. Of course, I was a virgin up until the point I got married. And it's kind of funny because, to your point, I did have an instance where I had this one girl I told you about. It was my fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, almost, I tell you, whew, but God,
oh my God,
spared me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she said when we was engaged, she said, "Aren't you glad?" Matter of fact, no, it was later. I had been married. She's like, "Aren't you glad that you didn't do that with me?"
Wow.
I was like, I couldn't even get mad because I was like, yeah, I am glad. Like I said, I'm so appreciative that we didn't have that encounter, because the funny thing is she was in a relationship, quote unquote, at the time, and she was pregnant.
Wow.
And I didn't know that about at the time. And had I laid with her, I would have, of course, assumed that was my child. Had no intentions of having a committed relationship with her. It was just I got horny, just being real.
Young man, yeah.
And she was there, and it was like my whole life trajectory would have been different had I laid with her. And it's kind of funny. I used to take my approach as far as virginity from Carlton, from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh my God!
How he had kept himself all that time.
Yeah.
And he had this fantasy view of what he thought that his first should be like and who she would be. And I'll never forget that episode. I mean, the woman was fine. I mean, everything that he wanted, she was that mature, smart, intelligent, successful, beautiful, and, he thought that this was the one. So he lay with her. Mm-hmm. And the problem was she was married.
Wow.
So here he had saved himself all that time. He had put some good boundaries around himself to protect him from just being with anybody. But then he still ended up, losing out because he didn't wait till marriage. He kind of jumped the gun, lay with this young lady, even though she was everything he thought she would be. She wasn't his.
Right.
So, it still ended up in being disappointed. And I was kind of that way. I made my own little list of this is what I want, this, that, and the other. But the funny thing is, if you don't have that commitment, you can still wind up disappointment.
Right.
Even though you might have a good memory, or a fond memory, but there's still that disappointment there because that's not yours.
Right.
There's no commitment there. There's no real long-lasting, long-standing relationship. it still was just a moment of pleasure.
Right. Wow, that's interesting, but it's so very true. So I know that things have changed since were younger teenagers. Now it seems like, um, thanks to the online dating and the different dating apps they have out there now. Do you think that it's more difficult for our young people, our sons, to find, um, or even start a relationship the Bible way?
I think it's difficult just with the level of just visibility that you have now that you
Yeah.
didn't have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, we live in a very connected world. And it's not just the online dating that you got to deal with. You got to deal with Facebook. You
Right.
have to deal with Twitter. You have to deal with Instagram. And you got all these different feeds coming from all these different directions, sometimes from a global standpoint of people, pulling at you and saying you look good and saying, I want your baby and all. And people are way more forward
Oh yeah.
than they were back when I was coming along.
Right.
Or probably not as more forward, but they have more avenues to be able to express themselves than we did. I mean, all we had was by the time I got to age, the closest thing we had technology was a beeper.
Oh yeah.
So,
the little pagers.
I thought I was doing something because I had a pager.
Right.
Don't give me no cell phone.
We used to write notes. That
Right.
was our thing. Do you
Now they
like
could
me?
text.
With the yes box and the no box. Now
Now you got texting, you got Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
People be throwing stuff on their DMs, as you
Mm-hmm.
call it.
They slide up, as they say.
Just sliding up. It's like people, you don't even know who they are, or sometimes you know who they are, but they come under aliases.
Yeah.
So
Catfish,
I think,
they call it catfishing.
yeah,
Yeah.
you need a lot greater level of intentionality around what you do when it comes down to starting.
Right.
You have to be more diligent because while, like I said, I'm not knocking, the dating apps and things like that. I think they try to do a good job of, kind of giving you some of the things that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the connecting you with people of common interest.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're part of your network already and you don't know it.
Right.
Kind of a second or third person type of a thing. Making sure that their attraction is there, of course, because of the picture, but it's got catfishing going on
Oh yeah.
with that. So they try to cover some of those things to kind of help kind of reduce the noise, so to speak.
Yeah.
And give you kind of at least here are some people that might be right for you.
Yeah.
But even with that, you still have to be very intentional in your
Yes.
interaction
Mm-hmm.
because again, people aren't always honest.
No.
People are not always genuine.
Right.
Some people are just looking for a physical, release, or a moment of physicality.
Mm-hmm.
So you still have to have that same level of intentionality, and you can't get rid of the personal touch.
Right.
Like I said, that might be your start, but at the end of the day, I ain't loving nobody that all I did was had messages with.
Yes, and
Like
some
that.
people are. I'm in a committed relationship online.
Right.
Hmm.
That's a pen pal.
Right. But they are. It's just amazing how you got to be careful of how you put yourself out there like that. Like really be intentional about getting to know these people the right way.
But the funny thing is that kind of underscores the point of you can become committed
Yes.
without the physical.
Without the physical.
Like,
And mental, they are totally committed to these
Absolutely.
people they've never seen.
Yep.
Way across the world, you see the shows like Married at First Sight or 90 Day Fiance. Well, some of that stuff is,
yeah, that's kind of
anyway,
crazy.
that's different. But
Correct.
I mean, it just goes to show you that you don't need that physical aspect to really be intimate in a relationship.
Correct.
And that physical can really wait until marriage.
Yep.
If you have the right intentions of when you're entering into these relationships.
Yeah, if you're really looking at it from the perspective of I'm looking for commitment,
Right.
and everything that I'm doing is driving me towards commitment. I'm being very intentional about, the questions that I'm asking, the conversations that we're having.
Right.
I'm being transparent with you, and I'm looking for transparency out of you.
Right.
And also, again, it's like this physical thing, like say that will come after marriage. And like say, if you really love me, if you respect me, you respect my views, you will be willing to wait. Because
Right.
again, like I said before, there is no such thing as safe sex when it comes down to spiritual.
Right.
Like I say, you can wrap it up and you can do all this other stuff.
Mhm.
It might prevent pregnancy. It might prevent, STDs or whatever. But at the end of the day, you still sinned against your own body.
That's right.
And you still, from a spiritual perspective, you're dead.
Right.
So again, that's why it's so important to put that to the side.
Right.
And again, another thing I was just thinking about, and I'm sorry for diverting a little bit, but is the strength and the power that comes with having that committed, intimate encounter beyond the sex.
Right.
Like I say, is like it can be so strong that nothing can break it.
That's
And
right.
unfortunately, some people use it in a very negative sense. Like they say,
Right.
they play these mind games
Mm-hmm.
with people and they captivate their mind first,
Mm-hmm.
and then the body, they can do whatever they want to with it.
Right.
And that's not what we want, because again, I'm looking for love. I'm looking for trust. I'm looking for caring, all the things that are a part of charity.
And just being transparent.
Transparency is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, that's something that most people cannot give, and sometimes you don't even know if you really want it because
Yeah.
of the past, because of all of the baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, it's a challenge sometimes to be able to process all of that stuff, and some things are kind of leave it, dead dogs lie.
Yes, best left alone.
But you have to trust me enough to be willing to, not go there.
Right.
Like I said, until I'm ready. Like I say, people have had molestation.
Mm-hmm.
People have had some bad relationships that
Right.
they've been in and different things. Sometimes they've felt like they were in love, and they truly given their heart to certain people,
Mm-hmm.
and they're overcoming these things and they're, healing from these things,
Right.
and you have to be considerate, kind, patient,
Mm-hmm.
understanding.
Right.
Like I say, if you love them and if you truly are looking for commitment, because that's all part of commitment.
That's right.
I say everybody don't come in perfect. Nobody does, truthfully.
No.
But
Even if you do it this way, you still have, it's still got
life.
to build that relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things you got to work through.
But if you're committed, it shows I'm in it. I'm in it to win. I'm in it for the long haul.
Absolutely.
I'm not just goofing off, taking pieces here and there, taking the stuff that feels good and running off when everything gets bad. But I'm in it for the Bible say, better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
And you making a covenant like we're gonna get through this.
Absolutely.
Everything, together, committed. Yeah.
Yep. And that was the intention of, like say, these relationships from a biblical perspective.
Right.
It was we were entering into a covenant. Like I said, I haven't been able to fully get to the full, purchase of it all, but that's what I'm driving toward. That's what I'm working to, and that dictated how they behaved.
Right.
And there was a lot of rules around how to behave in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
They followed them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what, like the Bible says, marriage is honorable and all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the highest form of relationships out there, as far as when we're talking about physical and all. You can have the friendships and all the other type of relationships, but in the marriage, to call you my husband,
Mm-hmm.
it's much better than saying, "Oh, that's my baby daddy" or "That's my boyfriend."
True.
But to honor you by giving you my name or me taking your name, excuse me, that says a lot.
Yeah, same for a man. Like I say, it takes something, or it's a high honor for a woman to be committed to one man. But it's something when a man says, I want you to have my name, I want you to be, progenitor of my lineage,
Right.
And unfortunately that's been abused, and you got, 5 and 6 different branches and roots, and it causes, that in and of itself causes a lot of turmoil and conflict. And while people try to work through it, the best way they can, and they make the best of the situation, is challenging.
Right.
Like I say, when you have multiple kids outside of wedlock, and that's another thing, a lot of times, I think we talked about it earlier though, but they have these children, with the intention to garner commitment.
Right.
That didn't work out, but now you find the person that you are going to be committed to. Well, you still have this reminder.
That's right.
And that's how sometimes kids end up getting abused.
True.
Or mistreated by whether it be the man or the woman. Because, again, this is a reminder of something that didn't quite work out the way you anticipated. And unfortunately, a lot of times the child suffers.
That's right.
Now, thank God there are a lot of people on the other side of that really do a good job of being, good stepfathers, good stepmothers.
Right.
You wouldn't know the difference. Like I say, my dad was one of those ones. Like my 2 older sisters, like I say, they're by somebody else, but you'll never know it. In fact, I didn't even know it for a long time.
I didn't even know it either. Like, what? Really?
But it's because of how he behaved himself in the relationship with my mom, but also with my sisters. That's a whole nother probably conversation,
Right.
but he coming into it knew this, and he adjusted accordingly.
And another thing too, people jump the gun and get physical. They can miss opportunities because,
Oh, absolutely.
like a person
I've
that
seen
they
that.
really love, they walked away from them. Like, you have a child, and that's a deal breaker for me. So
Absolutely.
you could mess up your future, trying to do things backwards as well.
Yeah, and that's all part of the intro.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I know people are concerned, like, well, I have this child. You should be.
Yeah.
And it ain't the child's fault. They had nothing to do with it. But that is a symbol of something.
Right.
And again, talk about children being called bastards.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a mark on the child. That's a mark on the parent.
Right.
The child did nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Child had nothing to do with that. That's between the man and the woman.
Right.
But unfortunately, the child a lot of times suffers from that.
Yeah, and another thing that concerns me as now today's times,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like it's expected. If you
True.
see somebody, you have a child, even if you're married, do you have any kids? How many kids do you have? So it's rare now, which is so weird to me, that if you see a woman that's single over a certain age and has no children,
Or a man.
yeah, and that's going back to the worldview. It's expected you're gonna at least have 1 or 2 kids and not be married, or you've been divorced, or you just had a baby daddy or baby mama.
True.
And that saddens me.
And again, it all comes back to how you begin.
Right.
Again, having that commitment up front, understanding that is the goal,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that's the thing that you're really probing, and trying to understand where that other person is as it relates to the commitment piece.
Right.
And then developing your relationship around, first and foremost, commitment. I know you mentioned at one point in time talking about like the arranged marriages.
Right.
How do they survive?
Yeah.
My friend told me, he was like, look, I said, when you come into a marriage where it's prearranged, say you come in with the mindset of, we're going to make this work.
Wow.
Like say, we're committed, and we really don't know each other. We don't really, have a lot of interaction and experience with each other. So we don't have a lot of history to build from. So everything that we're doing in the moment while we're already married is what's going to define our relationship.
Right.
And we look at it like either I can make it good or I can make it bad. And then it's continual conscious efforts and decisions to enhance the relationship. Even though I don't know you, how do I get to know you? Even though I might not be intimate with you, if we're married, how do I become more intimate with you?
Right.
Or because it's a commitment, we just keep it on a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
And we never go any further than this kind of transactional.
Right.
So you're my wife, you have my kids, you're my husband, you pay the bills. But we really don't take it any further than that. No, I don't cheat on you. You don't cheat on me. But we haven't really been able to have an enriched, wholesome, happy, kind of connected relationship. Because even though and that's the danger, you could be committed, but you still have to take it further.
Yes.
Like I say, and that's sometimes people just forget that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. It's amazing how serious it is. It was sacred. It's still sacred. Like
Absolutely.
The biblical, like people were, if you got caught, just like if you read in Leviticus and different areas of the Bible that talks about the severeness of even being betrothed, not even the deal isn't even sealed. It was as if it was.
Absolutely.
So it's like you want to make sure you're being led by God when you entering into relationships. You're not just going around one person to the next, one person to the next. I'm trying to just get your feelings or whatever, but you gotta enter into it with the right intentions.
Absolutely.
I think that's just the bottom line.
Yeah. Like when you say hi, my name is. It's like say, yep, you look good. Yep, something about you that caught my eye.
Right.
But now it's time for me to hunker down and really figure out, what is this? Where is it going? And sometimes it can stop right at friendship.
That's right.
Because that's about as good as you're going to be for me as a good friend.
Right.
But again, it's that intentionality that helps you to understand that without the physicality.
So true.
Because you get physical.
Oh, yeah.
All that go out the window.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of attractive people. So, of course, you're going to be attracted to more than one person. There's some beautiful people in the world, but everybody ain't for you because they look cute to you and you look cute to them. Mm-hmm. So that's like you say, you go past that oh girl, you look so good. Ooh, look at them muscles. Ooh, look at that body. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
if something happened to that body, or what if something happened to the muscles? What if y'all get
True.
stretched out of shape and you get a gut and some thunder thighs going on? Are you no longer gonna be committed to that person?
Well, but even the other side is, if that person, like I say, if they're that attractive, can you handle the attention that they're going to get?
True.
You know, are you the jealous type? You know, is that too much for you to bear? Because a lot of other women find your companion to
Oh
be
yeah, they
just as attractive as you.
calling your name. Y'all on the internet. We got the social media stuff, and
Absolutely.
they posting hearts and comments and
Right. And if you're the jealous sort,
oh
you gonna have to do some more personal work, or you could leave that individual alone. It's unfortunate. Same way with men. Like I say, if you're the jealous sort, say certain women, you gonna have a problem with.
yeah, and then even ambitious. Like you talked about, you wanted someone ambitious. That
Mm-hmm.
means okay, my time might be. I might not get as much attention as I would like
Absolutely.
because this person is ambitious. So if you're not okay with that, that might be a
That's
deal
a deal
breaker.
breaker.
Like well, you know,
Or
or
like
you too
for women,
lazy.
right? Lazy guy. Like I say, it ain't that he's lazy per se,
But
but he just doesn't have the same level of ambition in life as you do. Like I say, he
right,
comfortable with having a grilled cheese sandwich, and a cup of milk.
right,
And you want some filet mignon,
every night.
and you see that he has the potential to do that.
Right.
And it frustrates the Jesus side of
Yeah.
you because
Yes.
he doesn't, pursue, or he doesn't strive to meet his full potential.
Right.
And again, there are people like that. And
Yeah.
if
You come jumping in on the physical, you won't know that till
you won't know
later.
that.
You can be mad.
Exactly. And then you're going to try to change him.
Yes. Oh, I can change it.
Good luck
He
with
has a
that.
nice body. He'll go to work. He gonna go to the gym.
Right. 20 hours.
And you think she gonna get up and raise your babies and do? She might be like, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'm not messing my body up for you. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's those intentions. You can't let the flesh lead you.
Because it will lead you wrong every time.
Yeah, or it might be that attraction, but you take the time to
Absolutely.
intentionally get to know them, get
True.
to see if this is it, and then
You take the next steps. And
Yeah.
again, the physical doesn't come until you have the full. I signed the papers.
That's right.
Before God and man.
That's
It's
right.
legitimized. Now we can go to the physical because now it's lawful.
That's right. Now it's honorable.
Now it's honorable.
Right. But yeah, so this is a very helpful topic for me. I wish, maybe, like I say, maybe I just didn't pay attention, or maybe it was taught or it wasn't taught. However the case is, I'm glad that we're able to share today with all those that are listening today. And I'm kind of curious to see how other people met. And was it through divine intervention, or was it through a bump together at the store, or some people might say they met at the club,
Right. In the club.
or a church, or there's all kinds of ways
House
that
of the Lord.
you can be introduced, that the relationship starts.
True.
But it's like, what did you do from there? Did you have a one night stand? Did you have a 2 or 5 or 10 year engagement, or you lived together? Or there's all kinds of ways, but did it ever lead to commitment? Like, I'm curious to see how that story plays out. So
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah, it's like people are like, what is your story? I'm hoping one day we can share ours with everybody. Michael's better at telling it than me, so I'm gonna let him take that away when he so feels ready.
Yeah, we'll get to that one day.
We'll get to it though. But yeah, so I hope that we've enriched someone's perspective
Right.
today about worldview versus Bible view on relationships, and how you start relationships, and where you start, and what do you do after you start, and even just the salvation part of this conversation, how God showed his commitment when he died for us and
True.
prepared a way for us. And once we commit to him, we can build a relationship with him, and that's one that we all should strive for, because that's like the ultimate relationship.
And unfortunately, we didn't spend a ton of time on that.
Yeah.
But definitely, we're going to spend one of these podcasts talking about that specifically.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because it is key.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, that's how he showed his love. To your point,
Right.
he committed.
From the start.
to the point of death.
Yeah, when we were sinners.
Right. Before you even knew who he was, before you even cared to know who he was, he was already committed in this thing for the long haul.
Yeah. Yeah, that just if that's not an example to follow,
Right.
wow. Well, that's our time. Thank you so much for listening. We hope this episode has further enriched your perspective.
Until next time, I'm Mike.
And I'm Talisha.
God bless.